Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel. This is Business Connections Live with Steve Hyland.
Hello there, welcome along. This is Business Connections Live, the program for entrepreneurs, SMEs and business owners. Today's show, we're going to be discussing social media policies for staff. Let me ask you a question. What about your social media policies in your business? Are they just too harsh? Are they misinformed? Are you getting it right? More importantly, I suppose, are you getting it wrong? Joining me in the studio today is the fabulous Nikki Creel. Now, Nikki Creel, if you're not familiar, she is an internationally recognised social media speaker, trainer and consultant. She's written 2 books on social media so far today.
Yes.
Nikki, of course, an old friend of the programme, and it's always great to have her on the show. The 2 books, incidentally, we'll show you these. They are Converting Conversations to Customers, this one here, and this one you will see all over the place. It's a great book if you're not familiar with how to use Twitter or anything like that. How to Twitter for Business Success. This is the book. I remember picking this book up for the first time and realising all the things that we weren't doing right. It is a mine of information. So this book is predominantly about Twitter. This book is about the combination of Twitter and LinkedIn. So if you're using social media in your business at the moment, these are the 2 books. Crikey, that's like an ad.
I know, I was going to say,
I should, at the very beginning.
I should pay you to...
My bill is in the post to you. Nikki, lovely to have you with us. This whole area of social media, is it, I'll just ask you off the top of it, is it getting a bit out of hand? Are we losing sight of the irony in conversation these days and everybody's taking everything that's written down way too seriously?
I think the problem is that a lot of businesses don't actually understand, or business owners and employers don't necessarily understand how social media works, and so they're overreacting or trying to be draconian in terms of trying to suppress what people can say, and there's a lot of advantages you can have by empowering your employees. Obviously they need to be trained and you need to have a policy in place, and a lot of people don't have a written policy at the moment.
And those that do, when they police it, they seem to be very harsh, don't they? They seem to be led or they seem to be policed by people who don't actually understand what they're policing.
I think it's very easy to jump down people's throats, whereas there are advantages, and the things that you shouldn't be treating people differently because they've done something online than if they've done it offline. So you should be using the same rules. So if it's something that is something that you need to have a grievance procedure for, then that's what you do, rather than necessarily fire somebody the first instant that they do a tweet that's gone wrong.
I mean, from what you're saying there then, do you think that what somebody says down the pub is as relevant as what they tweet? Are they the same or are they different? Because sometimes we have a conversation, if we were to go for a drink after the programme, very nice you do offer, but if we were to go for a drink after the programme and we're standing there, we're discussing, sometimes it can sometimes get out of hand. I remember once being in a conversation, I think we worked our way through an entire organisation and were saying bad things about everybody, so nobody was left out.
Oh, that's the thing is, in this day and age, is that it's likely to be recorded, or somebody might have it written down. And with defamation, defamation needs to be written down. I did defamation, media law in journalism years and years ago, and I was surprised at what you could be defamed, but like leaving a message on somebody's answering phone could be considered defamation. So obviously anything you put out on social media is written down, or in a private email. And a lot of people got fired over things that they thought they were sending privately to another person, but because it's written down, it can be constituted as defamation.
Jack Dee said over the weekend, I think he was quoted in the Times over the weekend, you can see my social class, can't you, at rock bottom. Jack Dee said that most people, it's now difficult to say anything without offending somebody, and that we've lost all understanding of irony. You know, sarcasm used to be nearly a quality of us here in the UK, and we seem to have lost that now.
The thing is, when something is written down, you don't necessarily, unless they've actually hashtagged irony,
Irony.
you can read it in many ways. So you don't necessarily know what the intention is. It's how you interpret those words on a page. So some people will take offence to it, but there's no point in being completely vanilla about everything that you put on there and being worried all the time about what other people will say.
Have you ever published something and then wish you could have sucked the words back again?
I think
You've been the expert in everything.
it's when you have grammatical errors and they get retweeted that really, you know, it's like I just go, no, please, you know, because spelling mistakes.
I had somebody come back and actually tell me you need to watch out for your grammar.
Yeah,
Someone did actually come back and say that.
It's just really horrible when it goes out and you're aware that, you know, you press the send button too quickly. Brief interlude.
The news is in.
But I have the policy of if you're nice to people, nobody's necessarily going to get offended. But I've been angry once or twice, which you shouldn't do when you're on social media. So I suppose I've snapped at somebody or reacted to somebody, whereas if I'd come back to it, I wouldn't. When I reread it, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was in the moment.
When we look at what's happening, for instance, we've got Donald Trump in America at the moment, who seems to be putting out his policies nearly into a public domain using Twitter.
Yeah.
Do you think that example is now allowing other people to do exactly the same thing, so that people are beginning to use Twitter nearly as I'll just throw it in to see what happens?
Well, do you know something? There's a book called, I think, The Writings on the Wall, which is about the 2,000 years of social media, history of social media. I can't remember who wrote it, and I apologise for the
Our
author.
research team, even as we speak, will be finding out.
And they're talking about mass media as being actually a little blip in the long history of time, because people have always spread news, and some of it's been fake news. You know, people have always sent out messages. Even if people have tried to suppress it, there've been messages going out, and it's only really for about maybe an 80-year period that we've had this idea of mass media and being broadcast to that. You know, like this is things have been dictated down. And I remember when I was in marketing for Lever Brothers, it was like what we said went, or, you know, it's like what the company said, should I say. I wasn't speaking for the company. Whereas now your customer is a journalist. Anybody who's got access to social media has a right to put their opinions down. But obviously we're not talking about general thing. We're talking about policies and about companies. And I think quite often with employers, they forget that people have a right to express themselves. And there's an invasion into privacy sometimes. There's, you know, borderline in terms of what is private and what is public, because there are some employers who demanding people's social media passwords, which is an infringement on privacy. And I know that it'd be interesting to see how the law comes out on that. But, you know, people will express themselves, but if they are representing the company, then they need to be aware that there might be consequences for what they say.
What about this confusion then about what is public and what is private? Twitter, I think, when you publish on Twitter, you are broadcasting, aren't you? But so that's a broadcast medium, isn't it?
Unless you've set your privacy settings to private, it is public, in the public domain. And there's been a case, I don't know if you're aware of, a game retailer sacked one of the employees, Shaw, I think his name was Shaw. He got sacked in 2012, and he took them to court for unfair dismissal. He at first won, but then it was in an appeal court, it was turned away. And he said he was publishing something. So he made, let's just say, football banter type of remarks, which most people would have taken offence to. Okay, he did it on his Twitter account, which wasn't connected to, you know, didn't show that he was working for game retail, and you know, he did it in his private time. And he was saying it was a private. It was up to him to say that, and they dismissed him for that. With the appeal court, what they judged is that Twitter is not private. He had set up that account to monitor the 100. He was responsible for risk assessment, ironically, for game retail, and he'd set up the account to monitor the 100 the stores that he was responsible for, and about 65 of them had followed him back, and it was actually an employee of Game who had reported him in. So he was saying that, you know, sort of like, you know, sort of, this is my private account, but what was judged was because he had lots of people following him, it was as though he was broadcasting to the company. So there was a connection. I think wrongly they said that by somebody following you was an endorsement of you, but needless to say, he was following people, and they were following him in the company.
This is the issue here, isn't it? It is an absolute minefield, isn't it? And that's just Twitter, because I think if you look at the way that most of these, you know, the Googles of the world, the Twitters of the world, the YouTubes of the world, the Facebooks of the world, all of them, the way they are set up in America, they are not the broadcaster. They are just a platform. I think there's something like 22 lines in the Constitution that is written within the agreement for them to do it, which says that they will not be held responsible for the content that is broadcast on their platform. Listen, more to come from Nikki in just a few moments' time. We're talking all about social media and your policy for social media within your business. It's all to come on this edition of Business Connections Live. It's lovely to have your company. We are live. We're a little bit late today. Better late, but still great, eh? Late, but great. And, you know, cracking show is always lined up for you. Last week's was a good show as well, by the way. You may have seen it. Last week we were talking about GDPR, which I think is terrifying the bejesus out of everybody, isn't it? Nobody knows which way to turn, and also so cyber security as well. Mike Osborne was with me in the studio, as was Linda Bazant. Mike Osborne, CEO of Data Barracks, and Linda Bazant talking about GDPR. She's a consultant and speaker. Talking about that at the moment. It was a cracking show. If you are concerned about it, you may actually be reading about it in the press. There was an article on the BBC website a couple of weeks back where it said, will GDPR actually bankrupt companies? The fines will be horrendous. If you are collecting names and addresses or email addresses of maybe your contacts, your clients, even your friends, then there is some real issues out there. And of course, that kind of goes nicely on with what we're talking about here with social media. It is a frightening subject. You do need to know what you're talking about when it comes to GDPR. I don't. But Mike and Linda, they do. Here's what happened on last week's edition of Business Connections Live. Today we're discussing cybersecurity and the upcoming General Data Protection Regulation. Now, joining me in the studio today is Mike Osborne. He's the Executive Chairman at Data Barracks, and we're going to be talking about cybersecurity with him. And Linda Bazant from GDPR Consultant is going to be talking about GDPR in general.
The research shows that between now and 2020, the estimated loss per annum of cyber-related crime would be $1 trillion per year. So I think when you look at the sort of volumes involved there in terms of investment from a government to try and halt the effect of it, but also the potential losses faced by business, they are just huge numbers.
And of course the fines that are being levied at the moment are up to £500,000. But once the GDPR comes in on the 25th of May, that will go up to between 10 and 20 million euros. So for example, there are different levels of breach. So you may find that someone has taken with them a list of names and lost it on the train. And it is just a list of names. There's no other identifiable information on there. That's a minor breach. But if they've gone off with a list of names that has their bank bank account numbers on it, their email addresses, sort codes, credit card numbers. That's a huge breach, and that needs to be reported straight away. That's a very serious breach.
When the government launched the National Cyber Security Centre, their chief exec talked about Cybergeddon, where all of a sudden you've got states that are trying to hack states. And of course with the American elections, you've got the whole issue of whether or not the elections were being impacted as a consequence of cyber crime. So, you know, I do think it's a serious issue. If you haven't got up-to-date technology, if you haven't patched your operating systems, all of these things create an opening to some very clever people now that are constantly trying to find a way. And I would liken it to a modern arms race. Over the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen a steady increase on the number of clients that are coming to recover their data, not because their computer's gone down or a disk drive has failed, but because they've been hit by some form of cyber attack.
Well, companies will have a responsibility when they're actually hiring a company like Data Barracks to make absolutely certain that everything that they have got is completely secure, and that will be dealt with in the agreements, because obviously that's third-party data. That's the data that they've collected from people that they are passing on to a third-party Data Barracks.
And under the General Data Protection Regulation, you have operators, in terms of data operators, data processors. So the regulation does look at firms such as Data Barracks. One of the things that, for example, we do is we encrypt data at the point that it leaves the client location, and encryption, whilst not a panacea, is one of the best forms of defence when it comes to not only cyber crime, but also in terms of evidencing that you've done all that you could reasonably do if the regulator looks at a particular breach.
The General Data Protection Regulation comes into force on the 25th of May, and the Information Commissioner's Office have said there will be no honeymoon period. They will start fining on the 26th. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going specifically for small businesses, and in actual fact I spoke to the Information Commissioner's Office this morning and said that I was coming on the programme and asked for some clarification with regard to fines. Purely going back to what you said before about small businesses, the article in the newspaper that said, does that mean we're going to be making small businesses bankrupt? And they've come back to me and said that the working party at the Information Commissioner's Office is going to come out in December with a new set of guidance for administrative fees, because 20 million euros to people, especially with a small business, is terrifying.
I'm Mike Osborne. I'm the Executive Chairman of Data Barracks. At Data Barracks, we're passionate about data protection, disaster recovery, and helping small, medium firms recover in the event of a cyber attack. We're taking free tools, putting them on our databarracks.com website to provide information and support to organisations, and then of course helping those organisations if they need more than that's available on site.
Linda Bazant, LRB Consult, GDPR specialist, speaker and trainer. What we've been talking about today is cybersecurity and its dovetail into GDPR. One of the things we've been talking about is breach, and the most important thing with GDPR, which will come into force on the 25th of May, is that if you have a serious breach, it's very important that you report that breach to the Information Commissioner's Office within 72 hours of knowledge of the breach. So it's not allowing you 72 hours to investigate the breach and come up with the reason why you had that breach. It's just to say that you have had that breach, because it may well be that the people who are affected by that breach also need to be informed as quickly as possible.
Absolutely fantastic show. If you want to get an opportunity to watch the entire programme about GDPR and also cyber security, make certain you tune into last week's edition of Business Connections Live. And if you're thinking to yourself, boy, I'd love a programme like this for my own organisation, just imagine if you're sending newsletters out at the moment to that list of people that are on your GDPR endorsed list. If you are sending out a newsletter at the moment, imagine how much more effective it would be to put together a programme like this one. And the thing to remember, yes, can you do it with your iPhone or your smartphone? Other phones are available. Yes, of course you can. Of course you can. But there is a difference. When I'm talking to Nikki takes on the position of the expert, and that's what she is. She is the expert on the program. I'm just the interviewer. So that's what's so good about it. So Nikki becomes the expert. Now you could do exactly the same within your organisation. Say you have key people within your business that you need to get a message out from. Instead of them just presenting and just beam the face, let them be questioned, let them be asked. It makes a real difference to the impactness, if that's a real word, of the messages you're trying to get out there. Now, if you'd like more details about that, all you got to do is drop us an email here to studio@businessconnectionslive.com, and we'll get back to you straight away. Or better still, why don't you pick the phone up and give us a call? 01784 256 777 is our telephone number. You can either speak to myself or Linda Bazant when she's here. Steady. And we'll tell you more about how you can go about having a program just like this one for your organisation.
Excuse me.
Stop it. Also, as well, you can follow our stream of consciousness where we say quite nice things about everybody. We understand that there is no irony allowed in life anymore, or sarcasm. You can follow us on Twitter at BCL Business TV. Don't forget, you can also watch the programme as you're doing right now, probably live on Facebook as well. More about Facebook in just a moment too. And but the best place to go for over 250 hours of great business advice is to our website at www.businessconnectionslive.com, and it's all for free. So do get in touch with us, do watch the programs and thoroughly enjoy watching them as well. So thank you very much indeed. You're watching Business Connections Live. Great to have you with us today. On today's show, we're discussing social media policies for staff. Are they too harsh? I was having, while we were running around during that short break, I was just discussing with Nikki as well that really we need to have a sort of firm guidelines, and where do we start and where do we finish when it comes to putting together our policies. By the way, Nikki Creel, just in case you don't know who she is, she's an internationally recognised social media speaker, trainer and consultant. She's written 2 books on social media, and both of them very good indeed. So where do we start, Nikki? We've talked about potentially where people have made errors,
Yeah.
and we're going to look at some other examples a bit later on where errors have been made.
Yeah.
But where do you start with a social media policy?
I think the first thing is to have something, to have written guidelines. Because it protects the company. You want to protect things like confidentiality, and you want to make it clear and helpful for your employees so they know what to expect or what the guidelines are. Because if you've got very vague, and the problem is a lot of policies that when people do have a policy, it's just filled with legalese, which most people don't read, or it is very threatening almost, or like you may or may not do this, etc. Or it's very vague, so it doesn't give people a guide of exactly what they can and can't do. There are some great policies that I think they've got the balance right, because you need to, well, one that's referred to quite often, which is quite nice, is the Gap has their social media policy. It's very informal and it's in spoken language, so it says things like, so if you make and it's got like little hash symbols, etc., you know, what to do. So like, you know, sort of if it's a real doozy, this is a person you need to call, you know, sort of like, or you need to contact. So it's because things do go wrong. So if somebody has done something wrong, they know exactly what to do. And you're more likely to remember something that's humorous, that's conversational, and you're more likely to read it than something of, you know, sort of like referring to the postscript, you know, the 0.2, 0.3, you know, type of thing. Most people don't read that. So it needs to be something that people will read, and in simple language that they will understand, not simplistic, obviously, but simple language they can understand, and preferably with some examples of what could and can't be said.
But say you were working in an environment where the day-to-day language, you were mentioning it earlier on, that the day-to-day language can be somewhat barroom, shall we say?
Yeah.
You know, maybe you're working on a shop floor or something like that, where people have names for each other, and you know, sometimes things are said that probably in context are taken as a laugh, but taken out of the environment, they take on different connotations.
Yeah.
Is that not the problem, that you're applying difficult rules to unnatural situations?
Well, I think I mean, there's several elements in it, and one of it is treating each other with respect. So things like, I suppose, racial slurs, sexist comments, sexual innuendos, which can be funny to some people and very threatening to others. So you have to be careful about that, but that should be in your policy anyway.
Is that not the whole issue with social media? I feel like I'm getting on a high horse here, but is that not the whole issue with social media, in as much as that what you're doing, you're applying rules outside the context of when and where it happens?
Yeah, I think the thing is that you have cyberbullying, which is a real thing, that people can't get away from it. And so banter on social media, it's like if you're going to talk about, say, your boss, if you go to a bar and have a discussion, people know that that's the context. As soon as you put it in a public space, like Twitter or Facebook, where other people can read it, and potentially the person who's been talked about can read it, it does cause problems, because you don't necessarily want to read about that type of thing. So it's being aware of the situation, that, you know, it's like, oh, what not to say. I know there's a tendency towards, I suppose, political correctness, but there are times where people are threatened. And I know my daughter, I won't say where she's working, but this is a real incident. A customer, saw an incident between a female staff and a male staff, and they reported it. And there are only a few women. It's my daughter was asked if it was about her, and it was something that this person had been quite asking a woman out, but like full of sexual innuendos and things like that. And she had been threatened by it, and somebody else reported it, but she hadn't reported it internally because he'd said that he suffered from mental illness, etc., and she wasn't sure what she should do. So it was somebody else reporting it that helped. So sometimes you have rules for a reason, you know, in terms of protecting people.
But I mean, for instance, if you think back to when we were younger, some of the TV programmes that would have been on. Maybe you can't remember that. I remember black and white. But when you look back at some of the programmes, you just could not broadcast them today.
No.
But for the time and the period and the place, they were okay. And if we, by applying today's modern rules on that, for instance, going back to the Jack Dees thing again, we've lost the understanding of irony, we've lost the understanding of sarcasm, and also most humour is made up on taking a plus and a negative of a particular subject.
But,
it is the negative end of it is what makes it funny.
Yeah, there's humour, but if your humour is directed at somebody and makes somebody else feel smaller, if it's self-effacing, like, and you're laughing at yourself, that's one thing. But when you're actually putting a group of people down, then that is a problem. I know we're sort of getting into I suppose as a female, I've had it directed at me where you don't, and everybody's go, oh, it's just banter. I know I grew up in South Africa, sort of like, and I remember going to a Christmas function where they told racist jokes, and I was very uncomfortable. Where there were colleagues of mine, you know, sort of like, and I could feel them cringing. I was like so embarrassed by the situation, and I didn't feel empowered to do anything, and that shouldn't be happening.
So the clarity is in today's workplace, then, have a clear, concise, understandable, written in plain English policy that actually outlines what they should and shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, but I mean, it's actually illegal to put a racial slur on Twitter anyway. That you can be done for that, you know, because it's not considered.
Who polices it?
Well, if somebody reports it, you can be taken to court for it. So it's not appropriate. So whether you consider it political correctness or not, you know, but it's against the law of the country anyway.
All right. Okay, so that's where we start. Let's talk about the whole area of privacy and who can, who can't see something, because I think there's real confusion there, and I think some of the times the people that are policing the policies aren't as adept at understanding the whole social media platforms that they are policing. So it's a bit like, you know, there's a whole raft of misunderstandings going on. Twitter, unless you're private, unless
Yeah.
you're
But
where it's going.
even if you are private, that can be taken against you in a court of law because it's written. So even a private protected one. But if you've protected your Twitter account, which most people haven't, it would then you'd be showing that you made an effort to keep it in the private domain rather than broadcasting it publicly. But I know, I don't know if we're going to have time to do it just yet, but there's a case of somebody who had very few followers and did a tweet which she thought would only reach her few followers. And it went viral.
Is this the one on the plane?
Yes, this is
Now,
the one on the plane.
we're going to show you this. Now, please don't take any offence by this. We're showing this because this is all about education. This is understanding what can hopelessly go wrong. So let's just have a quick... No, it's the other one, in fact, we'd like to see. There was only two, and he got the wrong one. There we go. So this one here, this young lady here, she got on a plane, and she said, going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS, just kidding, I'm white. I mean, that in itself I find offensive.
Yeah.
So what actually happened about that? Just tell us the story.
Okay, I mean, she only had a few, I think it was 200 or 300 followers at that point.
At that point?
Yeah, at that point. She had been tweeting things like she tweeted something about a German not using deodorant or something, and the British having bad teeth. She's in London because the
So
British
she was attacking everybody.
Yeah, so
I mean, she had a common...
Yeah, so like...
but
so
sarcasm,
yeah, sarcasm,
irony again.
yeah, exactly. So she was saying those type of things. She sent out that tweet just before she got on a plane going from Heathrow to Cape Town. And while she was on the plane, it went viral. It got picked up because she wasn't just anybody. She was worked for PR, a worldwide PR agency. So it was almost fair for her to be picked on. So if Joe Bloggs did it,
She should really know, shouldn't she? I mean, we should know.
But what trended has Justine landed yet. So while in the 13 hours that she was on the plane, because it's about a 13-hour flight, where she was not on internet, she was asleep, just having a flight. By the time she got down to Cape Town, when she switched on her phone, it just kept on pinging. She had mass media, the paparazzi were at the station, and she'd been fired. And that's the consequences of a single tweet, which is less than 140 characters. Sort of like she was fired for that. It wasn't. There was no connection with her company that she worked with on her private, on her Twitter account.
Trouble is, with that particular tweet, it was quite offensive, wasn't it? There's no two ways about it. It kind of hit so many buttons in 140 characters.
I know, but she
So
did
what
an
did she
irony.
say? What was her
She thought
defence?
it was ironic. She did it because
She saw the
thought it was
irony in
irony. And that's the thing with irony, is that nobody interprets the Jack Deek thing. She thought it was ironic, and she thought she was just like chuckling to herself and doing something a bit witty. So it wasn't, you don't know her context.
And I can see that, because I did something very similar. I was heading up to London. Got to be careful, I'll own up to this, I have deleted it. I was heading up to town, and the young lady got on the train, on the underground, and she was putting her makeup on for 40 minutes, and she was pulling all sorts of faces and everything like that. And while she was doing it, I took a picture, and I said if she had got up 15 minutes earlier, she could have put her makeup on at home. And that was me being humorous. Now, I was surprised at the responses to that. However, having worked in broadcast, I once said something that was marginally on the doubting side of global warming. And because a programme had been on the TV. And I remember getting hundreds of tweets and emails that were very, very abusive. And people seem to think that they can vent their anger, they can vent their frustration, and they are no better than the person who has perhaps maybe posted or said the actual thing. So where do we draw the line?
Well, I suppose what we're talking about is in businesses who've got employees who could be representing them or be seen to represent them. So there are things that you might do in private, and whether she should have been sacked or not over one tweet, because I know that the Surrey police, they will take it, if you say something on Twitter, they will take it in the same procedures that they would if you'd said it in person or somebody had reported it in person.
More from Nikki, in just a few moments' time. You're watching Business Connections Live. It's great to have your company. As always, thank you very much for joining us today. A really interesting subject. It's one of those kind of subjects, isn't it, that when you're talking about it, I don't want it to go to and fro, because you've got some other examples coming up very shortly as well that we can also talk about, and also about protecting company secrets and making it clear what is acceptable and not acceptable. I do want to talk about Facebook, because there are different facets on Facebook where it's private or public. What is the difference? And I need to find out. One of the things, by the way, that I can't stand, and I know we're running over a little bit, I can't stand on Facebook. I cannot stand the swearing.
Yeah.
And it, to me, if these associates or so-called friends of mine, and I start seeing a lot of swearing, I don't really want to be anything to do with that.
Well, you can actually set your filters so that it cuts out all swear words.
Great. Can you do that? Not that I swear like the best of them, but when I'm really frustrated. And thank you. Thank you very much indeed. OK, let's go back and look at one of our past programs. Costas from Happen was on the program. We were talking about innovation for growth. It was on Business Connections Live 178 on the 21st of April. It was a great show. Regardless of the size of your organisation, we are always looking for more and better ways to innovate. We strive to maximise the resources we have in our business. What Costas was saying was that take those resources and harness the power of those resources to improve and to be quiet and to improve and to grow your organisation and your business. It was a cracking show. Here are the key takeaways. Costas from Happen.
My name is Kostas from Happen, innovation agency servicing crowded markets across the globe. When you're innovating, whether it's from a small business or a larger business, there's really 4 things that you need to keep an eye on. One is understand why you're innovating. What's the business reason for actually even doing anything? Which means you need to understand, are you solving a big problem or a small problem? The second is work on insights that you can actually act upon. So if you're working in a salad business and you're creating salads, spend some time with people while they're eating salads if you want to see some new things. Don't get it from reports that talk about what it was like when people were thinking about eating salads. The third one is create ideas that actually make commercial sense. And that might be not copying your competition, but do things that are right for you. And the fourth one is energize the business into action, which means it's not just the people creating the ideas that are going to push it through. The whole organization needs to sit behind it, which goes all the way from the top all the way to the bottom, because there are a lot of naysayers probably scattered around any organization, and it's making sure that they go into yes mode that will really help your ideas fly. That's what it comes down to. It's what we've been doing for 10 years.
Papakonuma, I think. Costas there from Happen, great bloke. Even he calls himself Costas. He's one of the few people that can actually say his surname. A great show. If you get an opportunity, do watch it. They are a multinational advertising and marketing agency as well. Absolutely huge, and we do thank you very much. He came all the way over from Holland actually to be on the programme for that particular week. So our thanks to Costas. And if you want to watch the programme, it's BCL 178. It went out in April of this year. Now, what else can we tell you about right now? I tell you the other thing as well. If you do like the programmes, it would be great if you'd actually leave a review of the programmes as well at the end, particularly on iTunes. A lot of people, we're getting thousands of downloads on iTunes each and every week, so thank you very much. We're getting thousands of views on Facebook. Thank you very much for doing that. What's nice about iTunes, it does mean that people are taking the programme with them, and maybe they're watching it on the train, they're watching it when they go travelling. If you want to leave a review, it is dead easy to do. You must be joking me. Get out of here. If you just go on to the website, ratings and reviews, and then write a review, just click on that. And then just leave a 5-star review afterwards. That's how great the show is. Merry Christmas, everybody. And it's the new iPad Pro, and it's fantastic, by the way. I just thought I'd say that. Just can't switch the damn thing off. Absolutely, it's brilliant. And of course, depending on when you're watching this, iOS 11 is comes out tomorrow, depending when you are watching this, and we're all very excited here at the studio. Listen, enough of that. Let's move on, shall we? My guest of today's show is the fabulous Nikki Creel. We're talking about your social media policy. Is it going to be too high? harsh. Nikki Creel, of course, social media speaker, trainer, consultant, recognised social media speaker, and she has written books on social media. The books go around the world, don't they? And
Yes.
people who read them take photographs of the books, and then of where they are with the book, and then they send it to you, don't they?
Yeah.
What's the furthest afield you've had?
I've had a whole range. Nobody's done it. I haven't had one from New Zealand yet. I've had from Australia, and I've had South Africa. I've had the States, Italy. Like somebody went on the Santiago. There's a walk that you do.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
We know the walk.
I know what. I can't remember what.
Yeah.
But you take almost no things because you have to have everything on your backpack. And she took my book so she could take a picture at the end of it.
I think I know who you're talking
Yeah,
about, by the way.
yeah.
She was on the program a couple of weeks back, wasn't she? Talking
Yeah.
about it. All right, let's go back to social media policies. Protecting the company secrets. This is an issue, and also making it clear what is acceptable and not acceptable. You said to make your policy as proper or as plain as you possibly can. Protecting company secrets. Do you think people really understand what they're doing when they are tweeting or going on Facebook?
I think it's such an important area that you need to educate people. So it needs to be in a language that people understand. So I do think it's really important to have it as clear as possible what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and what will happen if you do something. Because obviously confidential things, if you're working on a big project, you do not want other people to know, what project you're working on.
But people are very blasé, aren't they? They do feel, and you see this with Facebook, people will share things on Facebook thinking that Facebook is private.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the whole privacy thing. Twitter, broadcast, or you
Yeah.
can have a private part, but even still, you're
Yeah, I
broadcasting.
think you have to assume it's broadcasting in most parts, yeah.
Facebook, is it Facebook the same? So if I've got a Facebook account, the people who are my friends will see my private postings,
Yeah.
but anybody can see my profile.
It depends on your settings.
But in general, the way most people do it.
It depends on your settings,
All right.
because if you, like my son, he's protected everything. I can virtually see nothing that he puts on.
Not surprised.
Because I'm his... So, yeah, ask a teenager. If you don't know how to do privacy settings, ask a teenager, because they've sussed that one out. But you can set it up so that you broadcast only to friends, or you can have friends of friends. You can broadcast things to a selected group, or you can select people that you don't want it to be broadcast to. But a lot of people have their privacy settings on public, so anybody can see those posts.
Now, when you say anybody, do you mean anybody. Within their group? Anybody can see it.
Anybody. So if anybody's looking up your name, you can see those posts. Anybody. Unless there's like, you said this person's not, you blocked a particular person, and then they won't be able to see it unless they're not logging in from their account. So it is public, what you put on Facebook. But even with your friends, quite often people will share friends' posts, or they'll comment, and you'll see a friend of yours has commented on a post that you're not friends with, but you can see the comment that they put on. So sometimes the privacy isn't as tight as you think it might be.
Have people been caught out by that?
Of course they have. I think the main thing is don't put anything out there that you might regret, and especially if it's about business. If you're working for a company, firstly, it's foolhardy, and this is what has happened with a few people. They've gone, "Oh, I'm sick. I'm sick." They phoned in to...
Is that the voice?
And then, well, it's like a sort of...
And here I am at the beach.
Yeah, and then they post pictures of themselves on Facebook, which shows that they're not sick. Are they actually on a holiday, or they're doing something else? So, that's lying to the company. So, and there's proof of it. So that's not necessarily a sensible thing to do.
How do you use your Facebook account? Do you use Facebook for friends, or do you use it for business? Or do you use it? Are you using it in both ways? Is there a Nikki Creel that I can contact that is a friend?
Okay, so I tend to have things on public setting, and I had somebody who was stalking me. So this is my choice of doing it. I was told by the police to just shut down all my social media accounts, but considering that was my business, you know, you can't just shut down everything and start from scratch.
You've been stalked.
Yeah, yeah.
And how did
I'm not going to go
I know
into
you're not going to go into it, but very top layer,
Yeah,
top layer.
yeah.
What was happening? Were you getting messages?
Well, basically, everything I was doing was being observed. I was having my emails read and various other things, etc. So I made a conscious decision at that point that not to put anything on there that I didn't want, that was private. So anything private, my friends know about it. I'll maybe share things in Messenger, you know, so use Facebook Messenger that way, direct messaging on Twitter. But I tend to use it more in a public way, that I'm aware that it is public. There are some certain times where I'm conscious that some people who've friended me, because a lot of them are work colleagues or people in social media field, or some people, you know, like connected. So I don't necessarily know who they might be. So sometimes I will only publish things to my friends or to particular people, so they can see that.
I never realised that everything was public. Unless if your privacy settings are set.
Yeah.
But most people do go into it somewhat blasé, don't they? They don't really understand exactly what they're doing with it.
What it's all about. Yeah.
We'll just go back to Twitter briefly for a moment, because you're talking about protecting company secrets, and we do have. You saw a little snippet of it there earlier on. I mean, there was an organisation that was firing people. Now, and then they set up a series, a hashtag, didn't they? And the people that were being fired were tweeting it.
Yeah, so, I mean, the situation.
Can we just have a look at the slide, just so we can actually see? So you just look at. So guess what company it is? So that's HMV.
HMV. This was really very funny, and I think British know how to use.
Is this irony or sarcasm? I'm not quite, or humour. Yeah.
Well, basically, the situation was the people who were responsible for social media were in a room, and they knew they were going to be fired, and they had access to the social media accounts.
So this is the social media team at HMV knew they were about to be...
They were in a room, and they were firing people. They're going to fire people. Okay, so they were in the situation. They've got nothing to lose. And they had something, I think it's one of the top tweets, I don't know if we go back to it. It says, just overheard our marketing director, he's staying, folks, ask, how do I shut down Twitter? Okay, that shows how ignorant the senior managers are.
Yeah.
And it shows that they didn't have steps in process, because if you're going to fire people who have got access to your social media, the first thing you should do is deny their access rather than let that situation. It was very funny because I was watching it. It was very humorous because they were giving a blow-by-blow account, and obviously management were getting very upset because everything was being broadcast, and they didn't know how to deal with it because they just were clueless.
But isn't that the whole problem?
Yes.
You see, you were watching that stream of tweets going out.
Yeah.
You could see, to you it was humorous.
Yeah.
It's extremely damaging to the organisation, not particularly good for the CV of the people who are actually doing the tweets.
Yeah, but it was funny.
But it was very funny. But isn't that where we've got lost now? We've got lost between the fact that this is life, get on with it, and here we're trying to clamp everything down. And it's knowing where that fine line is.
Yeah, I think that the point that I'd like to make with this, and it was funny and it was amusing for us, and it made
so you're
lots
trying
of
to
story.
suck the words back now.
No, it was funny, but as a company, you don't want that to happen. And the point of having a policy in place, you need procedures, and one of them is about employees and how they use their time. And we'll go on to, I don't know, time management, because people stealing company time by being in social media is quite a big issue for employers. But there's also, with social media accounts, you need to have who's got the passwords, who's got access. If you're outsourcing it, who are the people who you're outsourcing it to? So if you don't pay them, they've got open access to your, how are you going to prevent that from happening if there's a fallout? You always need to think about these things. And the point of writing something down is for you to think about what happens in different eventualities. So it's a humorous one for us. We can laugh at it, but the thing is that that situation should not have happened, because if you've got a social media team, you should know who the people are on your social media team, who's responsible, who's got the passwords, and if you're planning on firing them, the first thing you do is take away their access. You can't, and if somebody's leaving because disgruntled employees, if you've fired somebody and they've got access to your social media, they are broadcasting on your behalf and they can say almost what they want. So it is something that you need to consider.
But Twitter does lend itself to that anyway, doesn't it? If you were to hashtag, shall we say, hashtag HMV firing, it's going to be picked up by HMV or whatever organisation it was. It's going to be picked up by them anyway, isn't it? Yeah,
it's going to be picked up by them. But it was in this situation, it was embarrassing for them because
particularly as it's going out on the company account.
It's going live, and they obviously had no idea of who was in control of the social media, because they're in a room and they know somebody in the room is tweeting and they don't know who it is, and that's a situation as a company you should never be in.
It'll be the one with the phone going like that.
Yeah, I suspect there were quite a lot of people on phones.
Yeah, I get the funny feeling it would have been like that as well. You're watching Business Connections Live. We're talking about social media and the consequences of when you get it hopelessly wrong. If you don't have a policy in place at the moment, then you really should do. But I suppose the words of warning are, don't make it too harsh or too complicated so that your employees just don't get it. At least stand up there occasionally in front of them and sort of say, look, these are the consequences. To be honest with you, I think we should all stand up and take a step back for a moment and just realise why these platforms are in existence. They're there to make money. Twitter is there to make money for the shareholders of Twitter. They don't care what you're putting up there. The more people that are driven there by the more extreme comments that you put up there, the happier they'll be. And the same applies, quite frankly, to Facebook as well. Facebook just wants thousands of people, millions of people to be on that platform so they can put advertising on it and make a fortune. They don't care about the content, and more importantly, they are not held responsible for the content, which I think would change everything. In the UK, if a newspaper writes something, they will be, and it's derogatory, they will be done. If a broadcaster then picks up that press release and reads it again, he is broadcasting it, he will be done. Everybody has to take responsibility, and it just doesn't happen with the platforms.
Well, in theory, I think the problem is that the law is taking a long time to catch up, because nobody had considered the consequences of things. Like, so I've seen a case where somebody outed a man. He was taking a selfie, and she thought he was taking pictures of his children. She took a picture of him and she said he was a paedophile, and it went viral and everybody was sharing it. Shared this picture of everybody. Now, he didn't sue her. He would have had a very strong case, and he could have sued every single person who shared that post. So that could have happened, but he didn't. But he lost his job. He went into hiding. He sort of handed himself into the police. He showed his phone, which showed the picture that he took at that time. But of course, that didn't get spread, nearly as much. This was in Australia. So he could have sued. So you have to be considered about what you post, and sharing somebody else's content doesn't necessarily stop you from taking responsibility of it. Okay, so the law is catching up with what's happening on social media. But the thing is that if we're worried about what you can and can't say all the time, there's a lot of benefits to employers having employees tweeting and blogging and posting about the company, because that way it goes viral. It's called employee advocacy. You've got a great chance for people for your message to get out further.
Remember what your thought is at the moment. We'll come back to it in just a few moments' time here on this edition of Business Connections Live. Great to have you with us. My guest on today's show is Nikki Creel, and a world-renowned, international, it's getting bigger and better, isn't it now? It's an internationally recognised social media speaker, trainer, consultant, and she's written a number of books on social media. They are a good read, actually. If you know nothing about Twitter, then go online. I don't know whether we can see the book covers on our camera overhead. Are they just? Oh, there we go. There they are. There we go. How to Twitter for business success. Learn how it works, why it works, how to find followers, what to tweet by the lovely Nikki Creel. And this one here, which has more, looks more at LinkedIn, in fact, converting conversations to customers, the essential guide to social media sales success. Hello? Social media sales success. Not easy to say, is it? Social media sales success by Nikki Creel. You're watching Business Connections Live. So then here we are on a Monday. We're live every Monday. It's great to have your company. My guest on today's show is Nikki Creel. I'm going to say it again because I like saying it. An internationally recognised social media speaker, trainer, consultant. She's written 2 books on social media so far. And an all-round lovely lady and a regular here on the programme. You were talking about the media advocacy. That's what you were talking about.
Employee advocacy. I think the thing is that people often want to restrict what employees do on social media, but there's a great advantage if employees know what the guidelines are, what they can and can't say, that they can actually get your message out to a far broader audience than people who necessarily just follow your corporate account. So there's a great chance that you could get a positive message out and more people sharing your content if you encourage that. But that involves people knowing what the guidelines are and people having being trained of what's appropriate, what's not appropriate.
There is this whole problem, isn't there, that you write the guidelines, something horrible goes wrong in the office or at work. Maybe you're heading towards the exit sign anyway, and you think, damn it, I'll just go for it. And what you say may not be a lie.
Yeah.
You may actually be within the company. It doesn't want to be spoken. The words don't want to be spoken, but it may in fact be reality and the fact. You can never stop that, can you?
Well, you can't stop people from broadcasting things and saying things. And anybody with a smartphone can do a video, can sort of be publishing, it's so simple to do it, and you can do it live really now. It's very easy to do. The thing is that you've also got to consider that what happens with most Twitter, if a company sees a tweet, they might overreact to that tweet and think it's far more serious. If that person's got, say, 30 followers or even 100 followers, they might not be paying attention to that person. So nobody might have seen it or reacted to it.
You
may not have any engagement.
It is a message stuck on a windscreen on a windy day.
It is, but also it's timely. So what happens, even with the Justin Sacco incident, it was like this spike, and then for a few days, and then invariably things go down, and people, sort of like stop talking about it. So it blows, sort of any crisis will blow over with time. So, then there'll be something else. There'll be another crisis or something humorous.
Unless you're the president of the United States of America and you're putting policy out on Twitter, is it something that businesses should really be concerned about?
What, in terms of employees putting things out?
Employees, and if it is so disposable, then the comments that are there.
Yeah, I think the thing is, if the management understand how social media works, they can then take a considered response to it. But the fact, like with the HMV director not knowing, sort of saying, how do you switch Twitter off? Okay, it just shows that they didn't understand how social media works.
What about training then?
Well, I think it's always essential to understand how it works, what the consequences of saying things, because somebody might think, oh, I've just put it on Tumblr, or I've just tweeted this, etc., and not actually think that there might be consequences of what they're saying, that the company might lose a client because they've said something. Things like you following somebody, like in the Reuters social media guidelines, they're actually saying that consider that when you follow somebody might realise that's your source. So, so actually being aware of a simple thing like that, they might go look through all the people you followed and sort of pick out, that's a person who's likely to have spoken to them.
It is an open shop window, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
People are of the impression that it's private, and I'm talking to you, but you're not.
No, and I've seen things that really should be sent on a text message, sort of like where people making arrangements, and you think, this is in a public domain. you shouldn't.
We'll be out on Saturday. Come and rob us.
Yeah, exactly. Well, sort of you just broadcasting private stuff. Do it in a direct message or send a text to somebody or pick up the phone, which is...
What?
know.
Talk to somebody?
I know, it's
Heaven
radical.
Talk to somebody? What's that all about then? Listen, there's so much to cover. I think it's just sad that it's got to this stage, actually, isn't it? There's something that was a free throwaway, actually, the social media platforms that were there, that it's got to this particular stage. And I suppose I can see that because we're promoting all the time. You use social media to market your business, to sell your products, to raise your profile. But in doing that, you never know what somebody else is going to say to you. Probably going to get a deluge now on the Facebook, because where I said I don't like people who swear, there'll probably be loads of it now, where you're going to be... was it unfriended, defriended, whatever it is, I don't care. It's been a real insight. What do you think the key takeaways are then for today?
I think it's important.
We're going to do it proper. If it's the key takeaways, that can mean only one thing.
Oh dear.
Who you are, where you're from, straight down that camera over there. So the airways, Nikki, are all yours.
Hi, I'm Nikki Creel, social media consultant, and we've been talking about social media policies today. And I think the main thing is, don't have a social media policy. Well, firstly, have a social media policy. If you don't have one, you really need to get one written as soon as possible. But make sure it's not full of legalese. Make sure that it's not like, if you do this, we'll take you out in front of a firing squad and shoot you, because some people have got that type of, like, you are not allowed to say that you belong to this company at all or mention them in any way possible, which I think is excessive. But you also need to give clear examples of what may be appropriate, or examples, say, like, if you say, I don't want you to use social media during company time, but if somebody is sharing company content, you might want them to use social media during company time. So you might say, treat social media, your personal social media time, in the same way that you would do a personal phone call or a personal email, and then people understand that they are using their own time, that they're using social media for that thing. So you might say, we're happy for you to use social media as long as it adds value to the company. So it's really about having a policy that people can understand, that is in a human language, it's not full of legalese, but also gets you covered, so that you can say, this is never acceptable. It's never acceptable to talk about a project we're working on, or it's never acceptable to talk about clients or your customers. So it gives the boundaries. It also helps your employees understand what is acceptable and not acceptable. And the positive side is you can actually your employees could actually be doing a good thing for you in terms of they are your best advocates. So they could be sharing how brilliant it is. So it's not all bad stuff and negative stuff in social media.
Nikki Creel, thank you very much indeed. It's been an absolutely fascinating show. It's really, really interesting. Hope you found it a real insight as well into what you should be doing as far as your social media is concerned. What I would suggest, if you'd like, I mean, we don't normally do this. This isn't about promoting our guests and bringing them on. The whole idea is to give our guests the opportunity to show their skills and their talents. But if you would like to get in touch with Nikki, you'll find all her details at businessconnectionslive.com. Just go to the link for the page. You'll find her contact details there. You can go along. And if you're an organisation, a business, and you are looking at the moment, there's the website address, and you are thinking to yourself, look, we do need to have a more coherent, grown-up, adult approach to the way that we handle our social media. I mean, how many organisations that you know have stood there with maybe a senior manager stood in front of new employees and said, look, guys, this is our social media policy. This is what we expect from you when you are in work. Here's what we expect you not to say about the business. Never say that. If you do say that, here will be the consequences for that. Now you all know. It's dead easy, straightforward. Things that you think are private are not. That's the most frightening thing. The things that you think are private are not private. So I suppose for all of us, be warned, if you're sharing your life online, if you're living your life through the screen of your smartphone, just step back for a moment and think about the realities of life. Breathe the fresh air and look at a tree. Listen, Nikki, it's been fantastic. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on today's programme. It's been brilliant.
It's been fun as usual.
Yeah, Susan. And we'll have Nikki back again in the very near future. And that wraps up this edition of Business Connections Live. What have we got on future editions? Well, on our programme next week, we'll be talking to Jerry Brown, the customer lifeguard. We're talking about customer experience. That's a great show. Looking forward to that one. Jerry will be back with us. Coming up on future programmes, we've got Michael Dodd, Kate Cook, Julian Ponan, who was recently on Dragon's Den. We've also got Warren Knight as well. Don't forget, if you want to get in contact with us, just give us a call on the old dog and bone or drop us an email to studio@businessconnectionslive.com. But from Nikki and myself, Steve Harland, have yourself a fantastic week till we do it again next Monday. Bye for now. Bye-bye.